Welcome to the Global WarWatch Network. Finally, Ukraine's battlefield wish list is getting prime delivery. Well, sort of. Courtesy of NATO and the Netherlands. Let's just hope they pick the express shipping no returns option, eh? Today we're unraveling the latest strategic developments around Ukraine. We're focusing on a really pivotal new military aid mechanism and also the complex web of European defense integration it seems to be creating. We've looked at a whole stack of sources, official statements, news reports, detailed analyses, everything we could get our hands on. To pull out the most important facts and insights for you, our mission today, basically break down how military support is evolving, the diplomatic chess game that's being played, and, well, what it all really means for security in the long run.
Yes, and what's really striking, I think, is how the basic ways international support works for Ukraine are changing. It's not just about the amount of aid anymore. It's more fundamental. It's about restructuring how it's delivered, which points to a much deeper long-term strategy for European security overall.
That's a really important distinction. So let's unpack this new mechanism. It's called PURL, right? Well, what exactly is the prioritized Ukraine requirements list, and who kicked it off?
Right, PURL. It was launched by U.S. President Donald Trump and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte together. It stands for Prioritized Ukraine Requirements List. And it's a new NATO mechanism. The whole point is to speed up the delivery of affordable weapons and systems to Ukraine. The big shift, the really key part, is that it lets NATO members and partners finance the supply of U.S. weapons and tech. They do it through voluntary contributions. So, yeah, the weapons are American-made, but it's European countries and Canada footing the bill.
Okay, so if I'm getting this right, it's Europe and Canada funding U.S. weapons for Ukraine, but NATO is coordinating the whole thing. That sounds complex, but potentially very effective. How does NATO manage that coordination? Is it really faster?
Exactly. NATO's role here is crucial. It's the coordinator. And they're using structures they already have, like the NATO Security Assistance and Training to Ukraine program. You might know it as NSAU. NSAU is kind of NATO's existing pipeline for training and assistance, making sure support gets where it needs to go. Using this ensures things are coherent and they can respond quickly to Ukraine's needs. And critically, these needs, they're approved right at the top by the Supreme Allied Commander, Europe Sexier. Having Sexier sign off means it's got the highest strategic priority. It really formalizes the process, makes it streamlined.
And we've already seen some pretty big commitments, haven't we? Who are the first to sort of jump on board, put real money down?
Yes, the Netherlands moved very quickly. They were first, pledging 500 million euros, which is around 577 to 579 million US dollars. And their package specifically includes things like US Patriot missile components, really vital stuff, and other systems too, mainly for boosting Ukraine's air defenses against those escalating Russian air attacks.
Patriot components are key.
Definitely. Then, right after, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark jointly pledged another $500 million. Sweden put in a big chunk of that, $275 million on its own. Their support is also heavily focused on air defense munitions for Patriots, anti-tank systems, ammo, spare parts, the essentials. It shows a very clear, immediate focus on Ukraine's most urgent needs, especially defending against air threats.
Wow, so that's $1 billion combined right off the bat, just under this new PURL system. That's a strong start. What's the word from the U.S. side? What has the U.S. ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker, said about where this is headed?
Well, Ambassador Whitaker said the Netherlands is just the first of many. He expects more announcements soon, with allies pooling resources like this. And President Trump himself has indicated Ukraine can keep drawing on U.S. military stocks. Washington seems set to release aid in these roughly $500 million packages. It signals a sustained effort, moving away from maybe ad hoc donations towards something more predictable, more robust. It shifts the financial load for these U.S. systems onto allies, which frees up U.S. funds, but Ukraine still gets the gear.
Makes sense. And how's Ukraine reacting? President Zelensky, are they optimistic about this approach?
Oh, very much so. President Zelensky called it a very strong initiative. He said it significantly boosts our ability to protect lives. And tellingly, he also called it a new, real foundation for long-term security across all of Europe. The Dutch defense minister, Ruben Brekelmans, echoed that. He stressed that supporting Ukraine pressures Russia, yes, but also directly safeguards Europe against what he called pure terror airstrikes. So Kyiv definitely sees this as more than just aid. It's a fundamental shift in long-term support.
Okay, so we understand the mechanics of PRL now, but what's really interesting and what our sources dig into is Ukraine's changing role. It's not just about receiving aid anymore, is it? How is Ukraine's status shifting in the bigger European defense picture?
That's a really crucial point you've picked up on. It's definitely not just symbolic aid or a one-way street. Ukraine has genuinely evolved. from being an aid recipient to becoming an active strategic partner. Some sources even call it a structural pillar in this new European security setup that's emerging. The relationship now is really based on reciprocity. It goes both ways. Ukraine gets the means for self-sufficiency to defend itself, and Europe gets access to combat-proven tech and operational know-how, stuff that's been tested in real high-intensity war. It's a win-win, designed to boost everyone's capabilities.
An active strategic partner, a structural pillar. That's a significant change in language, isn't it?
Mm.
And sources say the war has been an unprecedented accelerator of military innovation. Can you elaborate on that? What does that mean practically for European defense industries?
It means the sheer urgency, the scale of the war in Ukraine has basically created this pressure cooker for rapid development. Ukraine had to survive, had to adapt, so they developed sophisticated tactical and tech solutions incredibly quickly, often bypassing those slow traditional defense procurement cycles we're used to. And the fascinating part is, these innovations, proven in battle, they're now flowing back into European defense industries. It's actually reshaping how Europe thinks about operations. It's like a real-time laboratory for future warfare.
That's incredible. Can you give us some specific examples, maybe some surprising ones, not just the big defense contractors?
Absolutely. For instance, there's a Baltic startup developing low-cost missile systems with high production capacity, kind of an agile disruptor in the defense sector. Then you have a Finnish company working directly with Ukraine on advanced AI for autonomous drones, really pushing the envelope on unmanned systems.
AI-driven drones, wow.
And Ukraine itself has developed this pretty remarkable reusable interceptor drone. Get this, it uses a shotgun. And it can apparently take down Russian drones, like the Juran type, flying up to 200 kilometers per hour.
A shotgun drone.
Yeah. It shows it's not just about massive state projects. It's also about nimble, battlefield-driven innovation, creating a whole new defense ecosystem, much more responsive.
So this collaboration is becoming more formalized, more integrated. It's not just sharing tips. It sounds systemic. How is it being institutionalized and funded? This really does sound like rethinking the whole defense strategy.
It is becoming much more institutionalized. We saw the EU-Ukraine Defense Industries Forum back in May 2024. That laid a lot of the groundwork for, shared governance and getting aligned strategically. Then the EU Defense Innovation Office opened right there in Kyiv in September 2024. That acts as a key coordination hub for joint R&D, for innovation efforts.
An EU office in Kyiv focused on defense innovation. That's significant.
Very. And you've got major European players like Rheinmetall, Thales, setting up joint ventures with Ukrainian partners. Some are even setting up shop on Ukrainian territory. There's a Spanish company, Tecnove, partnering with Ukraine's Praktika. They have created human and safe systems in Spain. They're aiming to build tactical armored vehicles, maybe 40 a month, with turrets from another Spanish firm, Escribano. And other big Spanish names like Indra and Instalaza are looking into similar deals. It shows a deep, long-term commitment, integrating Ukraine's industrial base with Europe's, building shared, resilient defense capacity.
Okay, that covers the industrial side. But what about the money? You mentioned innovative financing beyond just direct investment. How is Europe actually paying for all this?
Well, the financial resources being mobilized are pretty substantial, and they're getting creative. You have the established funds like the European Peace Facility and a huge 50 billion euro Ukraine facility. But we're also seeing genuinely new models, like this Danish model. Denmark is managing the interest earned from frozen Russian assets.
Ah, the frozen assets, always a big question.
Exactly. They're using that interest to fund Ukrainian defense, logistics, reconstruction. It's a major precedent. Finland's doing something similar, using profits from those assets for ammunition shipments. It really pushes the question of how you can ethically leverage those immobilized funds for security, making the aggressor indirectly pay. And then there's the backing for a brand new bank specifically for this, the Bank for Defense, Security, and Resilience, or DSRB.
Whole new bank.
Yeah, supported by big names like JP Morgan Chase, Commerzbank. Its whole purpose is lending for defense procurement, helping NATO states hit their 2% spending targets, and sustaining long-term investment in Ukraine's defense industry, which, helps Europe's security too. It's a fundamental shift in defense finance.
It really does sound like a complete overhaul. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Diplomacy. There's this Trump-Putin summit planned for Alaska August 15th, highly anticipated. What's the significance? What do the sources suggest might actually be on the table there?
Well, NATO Secretary General Rutte seems to view it as President Trump wanting to, quote, test Putin to see if he's actually serious about peace talks. Now, Trump is reportedly open to maybe a trilateral meeting later, including President Zelensky, but the current preparations, they're strictly for a bilateral Trump-Putin meeting first. This initial meeting probably isn't about striking a final deal. It's more likely about probing, seeing if there's any real basis to start a peace process, testing the waters with Moscow.
Yeah, okay, testing the waters. But that raises a big question. How does Ukraine feel about being left out of these initial talks, even if they are preliminary?
Oh, they're not comfortable with it at all. European officials, Ukrainian officials, Zelensky himself, they've been crystal clear. Ukraine and its European allies must be involved in any substantive peace talks, especially when you're talking about ceasefires, territory, security guarantees. The really core issues they're emphasizing. No final deal without Ukraine's direct sovereign involvement. That's a definite red line for Kyiv and its key partners. And it's important to understand what Russia might be aiming for with this summit. According to sources like the Russian political scientist Sergei Markov, the Kremlin isn't necessarily looking for genuine peace. The goal might be more about trying to divide the United States from Europe, and trying to paint Ukraine and Europe as the ones blocking peace rather than engaging seriously. That raises questions about Moscow's sincerity versus its strategic aims to split the West.
Right, the divide and conquer tactic. So what are Russia's supposed compromise terms? What are they actually putting out there?
Well, the reported Russian proposal involves Ukraine basically ceding full control over Donetsk and Luhansk, oblast the parts they partially occupy now, and Crimea, of course, which they annexed back in 2014. They've suggested they'd stop trying to seize places like Odessa and Kharkiv and the cities of Kherson and Zaporizhia, but only if they get to keep all the territory they currently occupy.
That doesn't sound much like a compromise from Ukraine's perspective.
Not at all. And analysts like those at the Institute for the Study of War, ISW, assess that Russia remains fundamentally unwilling to compromise on its main war goals, which include keeping Ukraine out of NATO, regime change in Kyiv, demilitarizing Ukraine, and it's actually aiming for Ukraine's full capitulation. Plus, there's a strong assessment, based on intelligence, that Russia would likely just violate any ceasefire anyway, use it to regroup and attack again later, weaponize the pause.
So a very hard line from Moscow. How have European leaders reacted? Is there a unified counterposition?
Yes, there's a very strong unified message coming from Europe. Leaders from France, Italy, Germany, Poland, the UK, Finland, they put out a joint statement. They support U.S.-led peace efforts, sure, but they stressed emphatically that international borders cannot be changed by force. Full stop. NATO's Mark Rutte clarified this further. He said, okay, Russia might factually control parts of Ukraine right now, but that cannot be legally recognized. De jure recognition is off the table. He made a powerful comparison to the U.S. never recognizing Soviet control over the Baltic states for decades. It's about upholding the principle of sovereignty. And Ukraine, naturally, insists on its absolute right to decide its own future, free from external coercion. Its sovereignty has to remain intact.
Okay, let's turn back to the battlefield itself. What are our sources saying about Russia's current military situation? And maybe more importantly, how are they adapting their tactics?
Well, Ukraine has definitely been under immense pressure, near-daily airstrikes, for instance. In July, Russia apparently launched a record 6,129 drones against Ukraine. One night alone saw 728 drones. That's staggering.
A huge number.
Huge. But on the ground, there's a really noticeable shift in Russian tactics, especially with tanks. Russian tank losses were way down in June and July 2025. Only 22 and 19 visually confirmed losses. Compare that to 116 and 97 in the same months back in 2024.
Okay.
It's a massive drop.
Wow. Why did it change? Why pull back on using tanks so much?
It seems entirely consistent with this wider shift towards what analysts call gradual creeping infantry assaults. It's almost certainly because Ukrainian drone strikes have been devastatingly effective against Russian armor, not just on the front lines, but hitting them in rear areas too. Russia seems to have realized they just can't protect those valuable tanks effectively anymore, so they're shifting to a more attritional infantry-heavy approach. Meanwhile, Ukraine keeps up its own very effective long-range drone campaign, hitting Russian military sites, energy infrastructure. There was that recent strike on the Lukoil refinery in the Komi Republic. That's over 2,000 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. Shows their expanding reach and ability to hit Russia where it hurts.
So Russia adapts, Ukraine adapts. Given these ongoing military efforts, How effective have the international sanctions actually been? Are they really degrading Russia's ability to fight?
Well, the whole point of the sanctions is to degrade Russia's capacity for a long war. And the sources suggest, yes, they are having a significant impact, even if it's a slow burn. Russian GDP fell 2.1% back in 2022. It's shown some resilience since, but access to advanced Western tech severely restricted. And that's led to, quote, severe drops in output in really key sectors. Defense, aviation, microelectronics. They all rely heavily on those Western components they can't easily get now. This fits into this idea of strategic denial. It's not just about hurting Russia's war effort now. It's a long-term play to basically cripple their ability to rebuild military and economic power for future aggression, keep them strategically contained. And the scale is huge. The EU's up to 17 sanctions packages now. The U.S. regime, run by OFAC, is comprehensive, backed by laws like COTSESA, including those powerful secondary sanctions.
Secondary sanctions being key, right?
Yeah.
Affecting third parties.
Absolutely. And despite different legal tools, the U.S. and EU coordinate closely. Importantly, the Trump administration hasn't rolled back the existing sanctions. Plus, public support in Europe for keeping the sanctions remains surprisingly high. Around 71% support maintaining them. So there's broad consensus on their necessity.
Okay, so we've looked at the new aid systems like PURL, the defense innovation spurred by Ukraine, complex diplomacy, the shifting battlefield, the impact of sanctions. Bringing all these threads together, what is this long-term strategy with its integrated defense industry, its complex financing? What does it really mean for the future of European security, even beyond this current conflict? How does it maybe redefine what Europe means by strategic autonomy?
That's the big question, isn't it? I think it redefines strategic autonomy, not as Europe going it alone, but as building shared resilience, especially with critical partners like Ukraine. It suggests a future where European security is fundamentally tied to Ukraine's combat-tested defense capabilities and its rapid innovation cycle. This creates a more robust, more adaptable, more integrated defense posture for the whole continent, one that can better handle geopolitical shocks, and maybe crucially, one that can reassert a rules-based international order. It's about building a future where defense isn't just about guarding borders, but actively shaping a more secure, resilient, and technologically advanced Europe. And Ukraine seems to be right at the heart of that transformation.
A fascinating and potentially transformative picture. Well, thank you for walking us through all of that. It's a lot to take in. And thank you, our listeners, for joining us. We hope you found this valuable. If you found this valuable, if you did, please do like, share, and subscribe to the Global WarWatch Network. It really helps us out. We genuinely love to hear your thoughts on these developments. What do you make of PURL, the innovation, the diplomacy? Let us know in the comments below. And please join us on social media, too. All the links you need are right there in the description. Thanks again for listening.